we should start by thanking you for your service. And I know that from the if you tell me you'd have to kill me file, there's probably not a lot you could tell us about your resume. But you were part of the CIA Jawbreaker program. You're the real deal. And you had the opportunity in that experience to realize what you didn't have but wanted. Now it's your opportunity to create that technology to help our men and women in the field. Andesite is compiling massive amounts of data to do what with in combat?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. For me, going back to that experience in Afghanistan after 9/11, obviously speed was essential. We had to move very quickly. The threats were compounding. All of us who were on those first waves in Afghanistan knew that our country was at risk. The attacks were going to multiply. And what mattered was trying to get the information not just fast enough, but also to have the type of context that you needed, to have the type of insight that you needed to sort of make decisions quickly and act on those decisions. And for sure, everyone across the intelligence community and the special operations forces, of which I was a member on the Jawbreaker team, was moving with the best of intentions, but you just had massive amounts of information piling up. And again, everyone was searching for that context. So we found ourselves moving from village to village, town to town, province to province, oftentimes acting on quick tips. But what we needed was that sort of combined, coalesced provision of contextualized information that gave us the type of insight we needed to act. So in Andesite, to your point, we're now using artificial intelligence to move at speed, to deal with the volumes of data that we have. So in this case, it's not the special operations troops who are on the ground as we were back after 9/11, but it's the cyber defenders who are working so hard to protect our public service and private sector institutions from the growing threat of cyber attacks.
How much has the landscape shifted since you were on the ground to today with the advent of AI? How is that really changing the picture when it comes to the U.S.'s preparedness and its response to threats?
Dramatically. I think in this case now you see that AI is really the attacker. So you're seeing those types of either hacktivist groups or hostile countries who are using AI in the offense. I think that's changed the landscape quite dramatically. And when you're dealing with entities who really aren't bound by law, they're not bound by moral norms, they're not bound by ethics as we are in the West, then it certainly AI can provide an opportunity for the attackers to move quite quickly. And the challenge is now on the defense. We have to move at that same type of speed and alacrity.
Just to digress for one moment into a conversation or debate that's been happening in the markets here, there's been a thought that AI might replace the need for cyber protection, that in fact they're somehow competing with each other. You're using them together. Isn't the onset of AI creating more demand for cyber protection?
I think it does, precisely for one of the reasons we just mentioned. We were seeing attackers who are using AI.
As opposed to replacing these platforms, though. How are you marrying them together?
For sure. A quick background, my thought on that. When I look at the aspects of my time at CIA from which I draw the most satisfaction and sort of gratification, it was really the power of the team. So it was that human team that was able to harness technology, to use technology as an enabler. It was diverse teams with different types of backgrounds that came together unified by a mission to really solve hard problems. At Andesite, we're taking that same approach. So we build a culture that's really powerfully enabling that both within our company and for our customers, we say that we think the human beings are central to using AI to address these problems. I think, as we look at the power and promise of AI, it offers immense opportunity in dealing with volume, but we think even the U.S. intelligence community I'd seen with greater signals intelligence collection, more volume of data, you lose context and you lose that awareness. Having the human being be at the helm is core to what we do so that the human can use that which is uniquely human in the end, which is to use their judgment to make those decisions.
Well, that's incredibly important. Will that always be the case for AI, or is that the space we're in right now?
I think when we look at the power of generative AI, it's important for us to remember that as it stands right now, it's not deterministic. It makes mistakes. It makes inferences that are not correct. It can say and do things that are inaccurate. And if we're using AI to generate a poem, that might be sort of comedic, but when you're trying to protect your perimeter security inside a network, it's less funny. So We think that, as the AI improves, as the accuracy and credibility improve, then for sure within Andesite, we'll automate more of the workflow. But we think the right architecture, the right decision is to empower the human to be at the helm, make those decisions really sort of enabled and enhanced by the power of AI.
So what sort of guardrails or safeguards would you think would be the right way for the administration, for the federal government to be thinking about this? And I'm also curious about who you work with, the public and the private sectors. Do they have different needs when it comes to this and to this broader discussion about keeping consumers of this safe?
Yeah, I think to the different needs, one thing I'd say is we think the threat vectors are the same. So the threat actors, the types of attacks that, whether it's public or private sector institutions, the threat is the same and it's growing. I'm most concerned when I look at the difference between public and private sector at where the private sector stands in terms of risk. I think public sector institutions have, in many cases, large, sort of well-defended networks. There's there's a defense in depth. There's layered cyber defenses. When I look at private sector entities, particularly businesses with a global footprint, with potentially international, geographically dispersed supply chains, there's risk there. And I think certainly in today's environment, any businesses that are interacting with our counterparts in Israel are at a heightened degree of risk. So I think in the private sector, there's real risk there. And there's also been a blurring of the risk where you look at critical infrastructure like hospital systems, the energy infrastructure, financial services institutions. More and more that infrastructure is in private sector hands. So it's not as sort of tidily categorized as to say public and private sector because that risk is shared.
That's really interesting. Brian, I want to get back to where we started here. And that's essentially a new breed of CEOs. Like yourself, former CIA officers, in some cases, former members of the military who can take their active duty experience and apply it in these cases. Timing is everything, and timing is apparently on your side right here. Do you feel like you're part of a growing community doing this with your experience as a veteran?
I do. I'm starting to see more and more teammates of mine, both from CIA, the National Security Agency, the Special Operations Forces, and the U.S. military. I think feel the same way perhaps that I do, which is, I was drawn to public service. I spent 30 plus years in public service. It mattered to me. There's nobility in that mission. And I think to the conversation we're having here, when you look at the vulnerability of our energy systems, our hospital and medical systems, you look at the attack that just happened this week, this matters. And to the extent that we can draw from the type of cultural experiences we had, the types of environments in which we operated to try to apply those skills and experiences in building a business to help address these types of attacks, then I'm absolutely grateful for the opportunity.
Joe mentioned the timing. We're also seeing an administration that's trying to boost defense budgets. I believe President Trump's request for the Pentagon next year would boost it by about 50%. How much is this a boon to your industry and the support that we could see for making sure that we're bolstering our technology in the name of defense of the U.S.?
I think it's a recognition that in light of what's happening right now and with an eye to the future, that the threats will continue to grow. So resourcing cyber defense systems and technologies, resourcing the public sector defense of our cyber systems is critically important. So to be able to play a part in that and be a part of a team, again, of some pretty extraordinary people who are part of a really powerful network, it's a great opportunity, and certainly it's the right time.